Justice UU Lalit will see live streaming of all constitutional bench hearings, barring those related to national security. Now, interestingly, exactly 4 years ago, the Apex Court had accepted in principle the idea of live streaming cases of public importance. Justice Deepak Mishra, the then CJI, had passed the ruling saying that sunlight is the best disinfectant. The big question that we're asking today is that a significant move coming in by the Supreme Court, but does it need to do more for greater transparency? And to discuss this further, we're joined by advocates Sanjay Ghosh, advocate with the Supreme Court. Also joining us is senior advocate Satvik Verma. They're joining us live. Mr. Verma, let me come to you first. This question of exposing the Supreme Court to public attention by way of live streaming. I just want to get your first thoughts, largely because for the public, this has been what happens within the four walls of the Supreme Court is largely a mystery. The common references, of course, one goes to Bollywood to understand what goes on inside a courtroom proceeding, especially the Apex Court. What does this do, live streaming, to that public understanding of how justice is rendered in the top court of the country? I believe we're trying to connect again with Mr. Verma. But meanwhile, Sanjay, if I may come to you, the same question, the public understanding of how justice is rendered, of course, we go by what's popular in public domain. But what does this decision by the Supreme Court to live stream do to a public's understanding of how justice really works in the top court of the land?
Ashmit, first of all, thank you for having me. It is truly a historic day. Am I audible?
Perfectly.
Am I audible? Yes. So it's truly a historic day. In fact, India today has beaten the United States because even the United States Supreme Court has still not agreed to live streaming of its proceedings. So therefore, this actually has been a historic day. As you know, 3 constitutional benches of the court number 1 of the Chief Justice, court number 2 of Justice Chandrachud, and court number 3 of Justice Sanjay Kishan Kaul have taken up different matters, and they were live streamed. And to answer your question, whether much more needs to be done, of course, much more needs to be done. And but this is a beginning, and a very significant beginning. And I'm also very proud because my senior, Miss Indira Jaising, was the one who actually championed and fought this case, which you were talking about, where ultimately Justice Mishra had said that there should be live streaming. And finally, today is a day when the public gets to see history being made. We belong to a different era where we studied about the great cases by reading books, and which are a poor substitute to actual visual recording of what happens. Like, for example, I wish we had the video recording of the Keshwananda Bharati case, where 13 judges of the Indian Supreme Court deliberated over 68 days and finally gave India the doctrine of basic structure. So indeed, it is a very, very proud day for all of us lawyers.
If I can just ask a follow-up question, as far as lawyers and judges are concerned, there was this long-standing apprehension that perhaps the nature of the conversation will be diluted because it's being exposed to the public domain, because the public is watching. So does that argument hold good anymore, in the sense the public attention, sunlight is the best disinfectant? Is that the view perhaps?
Yes, but you know, there has to be a caveat, Ashmit. You know, today we are in the age of quick news, 24-hour news and 24-hour breaking news. And unfortunately, there's a tendency to convert courts also into a breaking news thing. And you have these legal portals, and you have even TV channels reporting, minute-by-minute observations of judges in sensitive cases. For example, let's say the Maharashtra breaking of government, or UAPA or Umar Khalid, or things like that. Now, you must understand, India follows the British adversarial legal system, where you have 2 parties, and the judge also asks certain questions which are uncomfortable to both parties. Now, when the judge asks questions, it doesn't mean that the court has made up its mind. The judge may often ask provocative questions. Now, if you're going to carry it immediately and sensationalize it and start insulting and humiliating the judge, then there is a problem, and this might have a retarding effect on the whole process. We have to be open to understand that there is a judicial process. Yes, the public gets to see it, but remember that it takes 5 years of legal training to be a lawyer. It takes 10 years minimum to become a judge, and to reach the Supreme Court, it takes 25 years. So these people, the lawyers and judges, know what they are doing. And if a judge is asking a question which may seem provocative, which may seem I'm using the term liberally, which may seem to be controversial, obnoxious, that does not mean that this is the view of the court. The court is only soliciting the counterpoint. So, often the judges play what is called the devil's advocate. So the judge will give an extreme point. During the famous ADM Jabbalpur case, when the Supreme Court was considering the habeas corpus issue, whether Indira Gandhi's emergency led to the suspension of the right to go to court and say, end the unlawful detention. Then you have the court asking Niren De, who was the AG, that does it mean that if I shoot someone over here or someone shoots someone over here in front of us, we are powerless and we can't do something? So that was a way, a question being asked by the court, a provocative question being asked by the court to exactly gauge.
An interesting question you're raising there. I think it assumes greater significance in the age of live tweeting and live messaging. But Mr. Verma, we finally connected with you again. If I may come back to you, the question here remains that how does this change the public perception of justice being rendered in the top court of the country? A big milestone here for the Indian Supreme Court. Mr. Verma.
Thanks, Ashmit. Always a delight to be back on your show. I just hope that the fact that we got cut off at the start of the show is not a reflection of what's likely to happen with some of these live streamings. But I think, Ashwin, it's a momentous day, not just for lawyers, but it's a momentous day for every citizen of our country. And I'll elaborate that because it's, for a variety of reasons. I'm also uncomfortable with you repeatedly using, for good reason perhaps, the word exposing, because it's not really exposing the court, but really bringing to the citizens of our country and to all those sitting away from the capital city where the Supreme Court is situated, a courtside view of what's happening within the court and how deliberations take place. I believe personally that it is really a momentous day for a number of reasons. One, as you said, it's going to bring about transparency. I think the public can observe. Two, I think it's going to be really significant for law students because, as Sanjoy mentioned, most of us during the time that we went to law school didn't have the privilege, but a lot of law students can dedicate, substantial amount of time to seeing some of this. I personally also feel that the live streaming of cases is really going to take up many more notches the level of advocacy that one sees. Of course, before the constitutional bench, some of the best advocates of our country argue, but I do believe that it's going to take up the level of advocacy even more. And I think it will, in that same vein, help maintain a little bit of judicial discipline. Or what transpires, the kind of timing. Today we heard of how the Chief Justice was, politely nudging someone saying, your time is up, let's move forward. And I think that's something that's very critical in our judicial system. We lawyers tend to ramble on and are in love with our own voice. So I think that will also get controlled. But as Sanjoy mentioned, and I completely agree with him, while I do believe that the online portals like Bar and Bench, Live Law, have really had a great role to play in this momentous step because it's actually, let's not forget, it's these online portals that were started this live tweeting. A lot of other companies, or other portals came in, they tried to copy the same thing, but the accuracy was great. Some of these portals are quoted even in decisions of the Supreme Court, and they've also had a great role to play in bringing us here. Now, I think there is a couple of negatives as well that we need to be careful about. Throughout the lockdown, when court was being done online, we noticed that videos used to be taken from computers and they were circulated, and sometimes they were even edited. So we need to try and create some discipline within ourselves where we prevent this. And the last point, just after I said that, lawyers tend to ramble on, I don't want to just keep going. I think there also needs to be this check that this will be that the lawyers don't start now playing to the gallery. because now when you know everyone's watching,
Sure.
it's kind of like a bit of, theatrics, and the whole country seeing you. So it's a great step. It is truly a momentous day, and it's going to be an evolutionary process.
Let me in fact build on that point that you're making, Mr. Verma.
Move forward. Yes.
You made an interesting point of playing to the gallery. The question I want to ask is that both judges as well as lawyers, they are at the end of the day human. And today we live in the age of social media. You made references to a couple of online portals. But of course, given that now the Supreme Court will be available to the public imagination, will also in fact be subjecting them to a lot of public criticism, perhaps public humor, perhaps comments that are not perhaps in the best taste. Social media, of course, is a different beast altogether. How then will this survive in the age of social media and active commentary by the public?
I think the active commentary, provided that it's healthy, is going to be healthy for the overall environment. Let us not forget the fundamental premise even of our contempt jurisdiction. Every time a big contempt case is brought about, people say, look, the court is got the thick skin. It's got the ability to prevent its majesty being brought down. So I think public commentary is not necessarily a bad thing. You may have noticed in the recent months, some of the newspapers have started a column today in court. And on any given day, they are between 6 and 8 reporting of what's happened. It is a development.
Sure.
One talks to one's elders in the professions and those who've been around, longer than I've been born, and you hear from them saying it didn't used to be like this. So, Ashmit, really, it's going to be a balance. We're going to have to find what that balance is in due course. We've taken a step. It's a great step, and let's just celebrate the step, welcoming the fact that we may need to fine-tune this as we move forward. But,
Sure.
drawing public criticism and public talking about it is not necessarily a bad thing,
Sure.
provided it's done with the degree of respect that our courts deserve.
Sure. Mr. Verma, Mr. Ghosh, thank you so much for joining us. We are, of course, treading virgin ground here. The Apex Court today was just day one. We'll, of course, see this exercise unfold in the days to come. Tomorrow, of course, the Apex Court, amongst the very many cases, will also be taking up, and it will be live streamed, the challenges to the 2016 demonetization exercise. An interesting experiment this here by the Apex Court. But let's move forward now on to another big story of the day. The Tamil Nadu State Cabinet approved another ordinance to ban online gaming in the state after its first attempt was struck down by the Madras High Court. Now, the governor's approval to the ordinance is pending. In fact, now I'm joined by Vaibhav Gaggar, who is also an advocate. Mr. Gaggar, let me take this across to you first. We saw this exercise being done once. It was struck down by the Madras High Court, and the challenge, meanwhile, is pending before the top court of the country. While the matter is still pending, an ordinance is issued. Does this then raise questions about perhaps propriety of this entire ordinance, this exercise of power by Tamil Nadu Cabinet?
Hi, Ashmit. Very strange, to say the least. And this is showing an element of serious desperation by the state government over there, because it was a resounding judgment of the Madras High Court when they struck down the previous attempt of Tamil Nadu to try and bring about a ban on all online gaming for stake. And it's also going to be a difficult one for them to sustain this one, because the law's rather well settled over the past few decades now by the Honorable Supreme Court of India, that games of skill, when played for stake, does not amount to gambling. I mean, I can understand them trying to regulate and prohibit gambling, but if they're going to try and attack all games of skill, I mean, can you imagine you cannot play chess for stake, or you cannot play, rummy, which has been held to be a game of skill by the Supreme Court, for stake, or you cannot play games such as poker where there are, international competitions and there are prize monies involved. You can't play those for stake. I mean, it's a strange and regressive step, according to me, especially with the pendency and the Supreme Court being seized of the matter. They're seized even of the matter from the Karnataka High Court, where Karnataka tried to bring about a similar legislation which was struck down by the High Court of there being unconstitutional. So, instead of trying to regulate the industry, bring about checks and balances, ensure that there is proper distribution and growth, they're trying to ban something which is really not going to succeed. Even if the law was to, retain itself, it'll be extremely difficult to sustain it in practical terms.
Let me borrow from an analogy that had been used by the Madras High Court while striking down the earlier act. The Madras High Court had offered the example that in case of two teams playing against each other, playing football or volleyball, but at the end of that event, there is a cash reward for the winning side. That then would be declared illegal under this ordinance and would also face a jail term of up to 2 years. Is that a concern? Because there is clearly no distinction being made between games of luck versus games of actual skill.
Absolutely. I mean, you just had the biggest sporting event being the chess world championship being held in Chennai, right? Now, are we saying that that was all illegal over there? If there was prize money and there were winners over there, that would have been illegal. You can, again, the 276 Law Commission report is clear about this. Justice Chauhan had authored that. The Supreme Court repeatedly, a 3-bench, 5-bench, 2-bench judgment from 1957, that's RMD Chamark Bagwala, 1968 Satnarayan judgment, 1996 R.K. Lakshmanan judgment. All of them are emphatically clear. A game of skill, when played for stake, is a genuine business and a genuine, legitimate exercise. You play Scrabble, right? You have quizzes. Tomorrow you win some prize money on a quiz, you're going to be put behind bars. I mean, it's really taking it to illogical levels over here, right? And this is a nascent industry in India. When we talk on the one hand about, promoting the digital sphere for India and, encouraging development in that sphere, this is one of the most critical industries in time to come. And you can be a global leader, but not with this kind of regulatory, issues being brought about. And time again, repeatedly.
Mr. Gagar, we're running out of time. Just a quick 30-second question for you. That the argument that the Tamil Nadu government has used is that this time
expert cannot disagree with this statement. Games of skill have been exempted from almost every state legislation in India from the ambit of gambling. The Supreme Court has said that games of skill can be played for stake. No authority can overturn that. And there cannot be two interpretations to that fact. So it is going to be extremely difficult to sustain that piece of legislation. And this entire argument, moralistic argument to say people commit suicide, they go into debt traps, etc., ban the stock market by that measure as well. I mean, it's really, you've got to have some logic to this kind of, legislation being brought about.
Sure. Sure, Mr. Gagar. In fact, thank you so much for joining us. The Supreme Court, of course, will be taking up that case post the Diwali holidays. But with that, let's head into a very short break now. Up next, we get you an exclusive conversation with Intel's Stephen A. Long about the company's India plans. Welcome back. Let's turn our focus now to the semiconductor ecosystem. After seeing a severe shortage in supplies, the semiconductor space is heating up, with many players now keen on manufacturing chips. Now, India has laid the foundation for global companies to set up semiconductor plants in India. I caught up with Intel's Stephen A. Long, a general manager of Asia Pacific and Japan, and started by asking him about his plans for India.
Intel is very committed to India. We have been for over 30 years. We've got over 14,000 employees here in India at the top end of what we do in the semiconductor industry, which is design and develop the technologies for the future. At this point in time, we do not have intentions to get into the manufacturing realm, but we see ourselves doing a lot for the ecosystem. As a matter of fact, earlier today, we were here in Delhi with the company VVDN Technologies, signing a memorandum of understanding on how Intel can bring the semiconductor ecosystem to India.
Well, that's interesting to hear. There's a lot of work that Intel is doing in that direction. But as far as fabrication is concerned, if I can just ask a supplementary question, what is missing as far as India's pitch is concerned? The telecom minister, the IT minister argues that India has a huge pool of talent. So the question essentially is, what is missing in this picture? What will it take for a big company to, in fact, consider India as a part of this supply chain?
Again, I would continue to say India, you said it, the biggest asset that we see that India has is its people. 1.4 billion people of ambitious, highly educated, innovative people. And that's where we've chosen to invest at this point in time, the 14,000 people that we have here. If you add on some of our contract workers and all, that's over 25,000 people, over $8 billion of investments already in the country. And again, we see India growing faster than many of the other countries and more investments to come.
Well, those are big numbers. We're talking $8 billion of investments by Intel into India. Can you give us a sense of how that investment is spread out? What are the areas that you're looking at and the opportunities that present themselves in the country?
Absolutely. First, we're from a people standpoint. We design everything from edge devices, so Intel edge devices, small devices, Internet of Things, things that make buildings smart, that make cities smart, that make manufacturing plants smart. The teams that design those products sit here in India. To the other side of this, let's go to the other extreme, the big, high-performance compute devices, the workloads that forecast weather, that meteorology, algorithms run on, AI algorithms, chips that have 100 billion transistors on them. They're manufactured and built here out of India. And then things in between, so like the client devices that we're known for, PC category devices, all built and designed, here in India and validated here in India. So those are some of the things that we've invested in on people side. On the market side, we see all sorts of explosion of opportunities in India. Some of the policies your government has are quite favorable to technology deployment. We've seen, from the fastest growing PC market in Q2 to a massive data center opportunity to 5G rollouts that we're going to be a big part of here in this industry.
That's great to hear. But that's, of course, as far as India is concerned. Let's talk about the global picture now. We're talking about a chip shortage. We have been doing so for the last good 18 to 24 months now. The question I want to ask is, are we finally nearing the end of that chip shortage? Is that something that you think is on the cards in the days and months to come?
The chip shortage has cost the U.S. alone over $240 billion of business. And it's taken a lot out of the economies. We've seen the interconnectedness of the things that we do, right? Semiconductors underpin so many different industries, whether it was cars that couldn't get shipped because of a device that you couldn't connect a USB cable to food manufacturers that were not able to deploy, continue to produce food because of technology pieces that were in there. We think we're probably another year to 18 months still into 2024. There's going to be spot areas of chip shortages, to which Intel has taken on as stewards of this industry, leaders in the industry. We've taken on our part in investing. We've announced over $80 billion of global capital expenditures investments over the upcoming years to address those shortages.
Give us a sense of what Intel's exposure to Taiwan looks like in terms of current investments and possible future investments, and also how are you accounting for the obvious geopolitical risks surrounding Taiwan?
Yeah, look, we've operated, we're a global company. We operate across the world, and Taiwan has been an area that we've had people in Taiwan for over 30 years. We do design work, validation work. We work with the ecosystem there. But we feel pretty good about our balance across the world, pending what happens. I think the part of what our responsibility to do is continue to remove some of the tensions that may be caused by geopolitical concerns, and that is in driving a diversified and balanced supply chain across the world. And Intel, and only Intel, can play a critical role in helping ease any escalation by helping our ecosystem transform.
Well, that was Intel's global leadership speaking to the Indian media for the very first time. With that, it's a wrap on this edition of Newscentre. News continues on CNBC's TV18. Stay tuned.